Hi, the Pragmatic Luther. Today I've got some information and ideas for the guitar makers as well as the woodworkers. While many of you may be aware of this device and what it is and what it does, some may not, and some may not really be quite aware of the wide range of uses that you can put this to. This is a dial height gauge. Now, this comes in dial form, as you see here, or in digital form. Either way, one's as good as the other. And unlike not too many years ago, these used to be a terribly expensive device when they were vernier and they were brown and sharp, or back in the days when only Starrett or Fowler made some of these, they were terribly expensive. And for those brands, they still are. But you can buy imports of these things that are very, very serviceable. This one is an import, happens to be a Grizzly. I'm not subsidized by them. I'm not pushing their brand at all. There's loads of these. And I just did a quick look on Amazon. You can buy these from, I guess, at the real low end, $25 or $30, up to around $90 or $100 for some of the imports. And if you want to stare it or something like that, I think 350 to 700, something like that. So you can go anywhere you want. But these are real good devices, and I'm going to take you around the shop and show you a couple of applications, maybe give you something that you can use to improve your accuracy and make setups and different things and gauging a whole lot easier for you. I'm going to start with the traditional use, excuse me, of a height gauge. Height gauges in machining are used most often on a surface plate. This is a granite surface plate. This one happens to be 18 by 24 inch. They come in all sizes. Uh, these are dead flat, and the more you pay for them, the more precisely made they are, I suppose. This one was inexpensive and uh, perfectly accurate for my purposes. But for a woodworker, uh, you can achieve wonderful accuracy even on your table saw using that table, or any other cast iron table you have would be more than adequate for your purposes, or a Luther would achieve accuracy there too. But if you happen to have a very, very flat workbench, you could even, for woodworking purposes, you could meet your needs there. If you want a surface plate, they're inexpensive, but you can also go, and if you can get a piece of 1/2 inch thick plate glass, it's going to be dead flat. It'll work for you. So will a piece of stone tile or marble tile at any of the big box stores. They're beautifully flat, and they'll work. So the traditional use here is, for example, measuring the height of this aluminum part that I have here. So I can measure that height, and I'm not going to bother to do all of that, but there we have the height. And if I wanted to get a layout line, say at precisely half of that height, I could calculate that, move my indicator to it, and this scribing point right here uh, is wonderful. You can just drag that across there and it will make an absolutely precise mark. If you can't see that, I've blackened this side, and I'll just draw across there and create that mark. And now you can probably see that quite nicely. So you have all kinds of uses for this. You can find heights very precisely. You can divide them in half. You can split them into whatever multiples you want. That's just one quick application. We'll move on to some others. Woodworkers and guitar makers as well, we're always trying to find the center of things, the center of a board, the center of a block, and so on. So here's one particularly for the Luthers, but the concept is the same for any woodworker. This is a heel block in a guitar. Luthers will know what that is. And this has not been cleaned out, but it's mortised in here, and it's drilled and so on. And all of these holes have to be drilled on a center line. And you can measure all you want, and it'll work. You can do it real well. But look how simple this is. With a height gauge, I can simply set the height gauge to determine what the total height of that block is. And you'll notice I'm doing this on my bench because I want to demonstrate that for short objects like this, and for woodworking purposes, this can be really, really precise if your bench is nice and flat. Just make sure you got all the dust and clutter off of it when you do this. So I have the total height. I'm simply going to divide that in half, and I'm not going to do that right now. I'm not going to do the calculations, but we'll assume that I made those calculations. And now, of course, I'm just going to go around that block, and I can scribe every one of those lines right on there. And it just makes this so easy. And I could double check my work if I flip that over and strike the same line. You can, if the two lines are not exactly the same, then you know that you're off somewhere. And I just guessed at that, and it came out probably within 10 thousandths of an inch. Lucky guess. I want to cut some dados or grooves on my table saw. Now, I could go and buy a gauge to do this with, and I don't know what they cost, 20 bucks, 15 bucks, doesn't matter. But a height gauge can do the same thing. In fact, I contend probably more accurately. This is done with a single blade, but you could do this with a dado head as well. What I've done is I've found top dead center on one of the teeth here. I just make sure that my gauge is located, hope you can see that, at top dead center. And now all I need to do is crank that blade up, holding down on my dial gauge, and you can see the dial move, so that when I reach the height that I want, there it is. And it will be within 1/1000th of an inch. It's that accurate, and it's that easy. In this application, I want to check that my fence is absolutely parallel to this blade. Now, this, of course, presupposes that the blade runs absolutely concentrically, which if you've got a good blade, it will. And if you really want to be accurate about this, you'd want to clean those teeth, because if there's a little bit of stuff on there, it'll make a couple of thousandths of an inch difference, I'm sure. But all I have to do is move the fence to within the range of my height gauge, and I'm just going to bring it up and touch a tooth, and I'm going to take a reading from that, and then I'm going to bring it to the other side. Now here you won't be able to see the gauge, the dial itself, but here I move it up, I touch a tooth, and if they read the same, then you know the fence is parallel to the blade. If not, then you can make some adjustments. Very simple. Well, here we are at the shaper, and I have a 1/4 inch bit installed in the shaper. I want to cut a groove, for example, in guitar making. I want to cut a truss rod slot in this neck blank. So I need a specific height for my router bit, and it's just as easy as putting the gauge down. Make sure your bit is lower than it needs to be. Put the gauge down on top of it, and as you crank up, the dial is going to move, of course, until you reach the height that you're after. Can you see that okay? Until you reach the height you're after. Very easy to do. So now I have a fence set up on the shaper, and I've got my height gauge clamped to the fence just so that it'll stay in position. And what I've done is located the scriber against a router bit. What I'm going to do now is find the outermost swing of the router bit. And I've done that right there. So now I know where that is. And I'm going to lock this thing down just so that I can maintain that. Now, by knowing the diameter of the router bit and by doing some simple calculations, I can adjust my fence to the point where I can hit, for example, dead center on this neck blank, or any given position on a board that you may want to cut a groove in, or a similar operation, maybe a rabbet or something. These are very simple things to do. Now, I'm sure some of you may be wondering, why should I deal with layout tools or gauges that work in thousandths of an inch? And I can give you two good reasons. First of all, and this is the more important one, I think, the more precise your layout lines can be and the more precise your setups can be, the more precise your work is. especially when it comes to layout and measurement lines. Your work can only be as precise as they are. So if you're imprecise, your work will be slightly less precise than that, I guess. Um, that doesn't mean that you absolutely have to have this stuff, but I think it's a point to ponder. Another advantage for me, I'm getting older. My vision is not as crystal clear as it used to be. Some of you may be in the same position. It's just very nice to be able to, and it's also quick and easy, and it's very, very deliberate. You don't have to guess with this. Things are not moving. There's no parallax. It's nice to be able to just set a height on something and then split that in half or divide it up any way you want, use that information, and then reset your gauge to whatever you want. Even if you just want to get a mark on this 1/2 inch above the edge of it. So you set it on the gauge and there you go. It's, to my way of thinking, really advantageous. And while I'm here, I want to poo-poo the idea, if you will, because I like to ruffle feathers. I want to poo-poo the idea of all of these different gauges that you can buy for setting router height and for setting table saw blade height and all of this. All it is an offshoot of this, and this is more accurate and it's more applicable than a whole bunch of specialized tools that you can spend an awful lot of money on. And a lot of this stuff is made of anodized aluminum, and I'd like to warn everybody against, or about, I should say, anodized aluminum tools. Don't drop them on a concrete floor. Don't drop them on the saw table because they're aluminum. And that anodized surface, while it's harder than cast iron, is only a few molecular layers thick, and it's like an eggshell. So it's going to dent, and you're going to lose the accuracy in some of those tools. So I'd be real careful before I go buying a bunch of that stuff. So anyway, to the Luthers and the woodworkers, I hope this has been helpful. I am the pragmatic Luther, always finding ways to do things a little cheaper, but with excellent results. Hope you'll put a like on the video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again. Happy woodworking and happy guitar building. Catch you the next time.